the golf ball rollback was supposed to be a boring little equipment tweak. Instead, it became the spark that set the entire PGA Tour locker room on fire. Right now, the biggest names in the sport are not just grumbling about giving up a few yards off the tee. They are staring at the direction the whole game is being dragged in, and they are flatly refusing to go along with it. Brian Rolapp is sitting in the CEO chair, trying to juggle the demands of the USGA on one side and the reality of his own product on the other. And the players have finally hit their breaking point. They do not see these changes as a rescue mission for the sport. They see them as a direct strike against their competitive edge and the history of the tour. The USGA and the R&A insist professional distances have ballooned too far, and they wave around data showing average driving distance creeping up year after year. But the players say that argument conveniently ignores modern course setup. The tour already grows the rough, pinches the fairways, and cranks the greens up to glass every single week, slapping a restricted golf ball on top of all that is just a lazy shortcut around fixing the real problem. And here is the kicker. The proposed model local rule only touches elite competition. Amateurs keep playing the current ball. So you would end up with a fractured split equipment standard where the pros and the weekend players are literally not playing the same game. This is not some petty squabble over tee times or purse splits. The governing bodies are reaching in and changing the fundamental tools of the sport. And while tour leadership quietly cooks up a two-tier system that could shove historic events down into a lower division, the players have done the math. They know that if they cave on the rollback now, they surrender every scrap of leverage they will ever have for the future. They are out of patience, and the quiet whispers in the locker room are turning into loud, unmistakable demands. The two-tier system is even more dangerous once you follow the money. If historic events get pushed into a secondary tier, the prize money at those tournaments shrinks. That is not a maybe. Sponsors pay less for a second division event, the tour collects less, and there is simply less cash to hand out. For the players ranked outside the top 50 in the world, those mid-tier events are the entire way they make a living. Downgrade them, and you are quietly slashing the paychecks of the majority of the tour. You carve a brutal wealth gap right down the middle. Superstars at the top, and working-class professionals scraping to keep their cards at the bottom. I genuinely believe this rollback is a massive mistake that guts the game. So tell me if you agree the governing bodies are completely out of touch. Drop your thoughts below and hit subscribe for the real truth about tour politics. With the pressure climbing, somebody had to step up and draw a hard line in the sand. The Player Council understood something crucial. A scattered pile of individual complaints gets ignored by the front office in about 5 minutes. What they needed was a unified voice. A name big enough to carry the full weight of an ultimatum and force the CEO to actually stop and listen. The first man to publicly tear into the plan was Justin Thomas. As a leading voice on the Player Council, he made it crystal clear. Changing the golf ball for professionals while letting amateurs keep the current version is a terrible, confusing idea. He argued it splits the sport in two, baffles everyday fans, and scrambles the equipment everyone buys on a Saturday morning. His message to the front office was simple. Change the ball, and you change the fundamental test of golf itself. Thomas built his entire game on flighting the ball and generating monstrous spin. A rolled-back ball rips the heart out of his short game, forcing him to rebuild his swing just to stop the thing on firm greens. He reminded the front office of exactly what they were asking. They want the best athletes on the planet to play with inferior equipment. It is like ordering a Formula One team to bolt standard street tires onto their cars just to slow the race down. Thomas made it plain. The players would rather attack longer, harder courses than accept a handicapped ball. They figured one loud voice might be enough to jam the machine. They had no clue the CEO was already drafting something far darker behind closed doors. Justin Thomas was only the opening shot. The real earthquake hit when Rory McIlroy stepped into the fight. McIlroy has never once been shy about tour politics. But this time, his tone was different, colder. He was not just poking holes in a rule. He was challenging Brian Rolapp's leadership directly and openly questioning whether the CEO had any idea what the players actually wanted. McIlroy called the proposed lower tier of events a glorified minor league. And that single phrase sent shockwaves through the golf world. His argument cut straight to the bone. The PGA Tour's value comes from its history, not from some corporate reshuffle. Events like the Heritage and the Valero Texas Open have been woven into the tour for generations. Bumping them down to second-tier status would torch the careers of the players who built their entire resumes at those tournaments. He pointed straight at the par fours at Harbor Town, holes designed to test precise iron shots in the teeth of the coastal wind. Roll the ball back and those holes go defenseless. The tournament loses the exact character that makes it special. He hammered the Valero too, where the local fans create an atmosphere nobody can fake. Downgrade these events, and you are telling entire communities their support means nothing. You are telling the fans who buy the tickets that their favorite tournaments are now second class. But loud warnings rarely bend corporate policy. The front office just sat back and waited for the media storm to blow over, until a legend decided to walk into the room. When Tiger Woods stays out of tour politics, people notice. When he steps in, the entire sport stops breathing. His history with the player council is complicated, and he usually prefers to let others handle the public brawls. But when the two-tier system threatened to restructure the very tour he built into a global empire, Tiger made his position known. He lined up with Thomas and McIlroy against the rollback. But his real fear was the schedule. Tiger remembered his 2018 win at Colonial, and how those local fans treat players like family. He reminded everyone that the Byron Nelson was his first professional event. These tournaments are the foundation of the sport, he said, not line items on a spreadsheet. And then he pointed at the broadcast reality nobody wanted to say out loud. Networks do not pay billions for a logo. They pay for the aura of the players. Pull the top stars out of the field, and casual viewers change the channel. Advertising revenue collapses instantly, and network executives start screaming. His involvement handed the player REVOLT a level of authority the front office simply could not wave away. Business threats are hard to ignore. But Rolapp still believed he could split the locker room down the middle. Until the current king of golf picked a side, Scottie Scheffler rarely speaks out on anything political. He lets his golf do the talking. But as the #1 player in the world and the most dominant force the game has right now, his silence was no longer an option. When the ultimatum was being drafted, Scheffler stepped forward and signed his name, and that signature sent the clearest possible message to Brian Rolapp. This was not a small faction of angry veterans. This was the entire locker room, led by the best player on the planet. Scheffler made it obvious that the younger generation of stars would not swallow a watered-down version of the sport. He understood the rollback and the schedule changes were two sides of the same coin. Both strip power from the players and dump it into the laps of executives who have never once competed at the highest level. Scottie has dominated by bombing the ball and playing flawless iron golf. The current ball is central to his skill set. A rollback rewrites the mathematical advantage he built over the entire field, and he flatly refused to let the tour dictate his calendar. The current model lets top players peak for the majors. The two-tier system would chain them to a rigid schedule of downgraded events just to hold their status. Scottie refuses to be treated like a contracted employee. Having the #1 player on board was a devastating blow. Yet the CEO still gambled that the younger generation lacked the experience to pull off a real strike. That assumption died the second Xander Schauffele added his name to the document. As one of the most consistent performers on tour and a recent major champion, Schauffele represents the next wave of leadership. His involvement proved this revolt stretched across every age group and every level of the tour hierarchy. Schauffele is steady, reliable. When he commits to a cause, he brings a calm, grounding authority that steadies the more emotional voices in the room. He reminded the front office of a simple truth. The players generate the revenue. Strip away their talent and their draw, and the entire corporate structure is worth nothing. His strategic mind helped the council forge their demands into a clear, actionable list the CEO could not dismiss as emotional whining. Xander uses mid-tier events to fine-tune his game before the majors. He needs specific course setups to test his irons. Downgrade those events and the conditions change, wrecking his preparation. He also flagged the FedEx Cup points system, which rewards competing across a wide spread of events. The two-tier system would scramble the points race and throw the playoffs out of balance. His warning was blunt. Degrade the product on the grass and the players will refuse to show up. Understanding the rules is one thing. Weaponizing the financial leverage is a completely different war. And the locker room needed a cold, calculating mind to run the numbers. Jordan Spieth was the perfect man for the job. He understands the business side of golf better than almost anyone in that room. Spieth has a long history with the player council, knows exactly how the tour's governance machinery works. When the front office tried to bury the details of the two-tier system under a mountain of corporate jargon, Spieth tore straight through the documents. He found the precise clauses that would let the CEO downgrade historic events without a full player vote. He mapped out the legal traps and showed the rest of the players exactly how they were being maneuvered. Spieth dug into the historical council voting records and found the crack. Any major change to the tournament schedule requires a simple majority vote from the players. The front office had been trying to sneak the two-tier system through as a string of minor administrative tweaks precisely to dodge that vote. Spieth dragged that loophole into the open for the entire locker room to see. Then he drafted a formal legal response, citing the exact sections of tour regulation that protect the council's authority. He showed the CEO the trap he was walking into. Force the schedule changes without a vote, and the players file a formal grievance and haul the whole thing to arbitration. Spieth turned a corporate memo into a binding legal fight. Paper models cannot stop a united locker room, so the front office pinned its hopes on the international stars breaking rank and saving the schedule. Patrick Cantlay brought a completely different energy to the war. As a former FedEx Cup champion and one of the most respected voices among his peers, Cantlay is measured and deliberate in everything he touches. He does not sign his name to anything until he has dissected every angle. Cantlay sat down with the financial advisors and calculated the exact television revenue tied to their individual appearances. He built a detailed spreadsheet showing which events the tour desperately needed them to play, and which sponsors would yank their money the instant the stars skipped. His cold, hard math proved the tour's entire financial model leaned on their participation. He studied the specific television windows for the downgraded events and noted that the current broadcast slots pull a defined amount of ad revenue per hour. Shove those events into a secondary tier, and the networks bury them in worse time slots, and ad rates crater by at least 30%. Cantlay also crunched the exact hit to the local host committees. The charities that depend on these tournaments for their yearly funding would hemorrhage millions. His report proved the two-tier system would actually cost the tour money in the long run, because the sponsors would walk. The math was brutal. The CEO's plan was financially suicidal. If you want to stay locked in on every move in this tour power struggle, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss the real story. European resistance was officially in. The CEO was hemorrhaging allies, so he prayed the quiet perfectionists would stay out of the politics. Victor Hovland brought the international perspective. As one of the top European players on tour, his signature proved this was never just an American issue. The rollback and the two-tier system hit every player who competes on the PGA Tour, no matter where home is. Hovland made it clear the global golf community was watching every second. Let the governing bodies force a split in the equipment rules, and the damage spreads worldwide. He pointed out that the DP World Tour in Europe is monitoring this closely. Terrified the PGA Tour's rollback will drag them into adopting the same restricted ball, which would wreck their relationship with the global equipment manufacturers. He flagged the international sponsors too, the global brands that want their products tied to the absolute best equipment on earth. Force the players onto a watered-down ball, and those sponsors start questioning the value of their investment. This, Hovland made clear, is a global problem that will rattle the entire golf industry. Silence from the precision players usually just means they are locked into their swing. This time, their silence meant they were quietly organizing the final strike. Collin Morikawa is known for his quiet intensity and surgical precision. He rarely talks to the media about anything beyond his next shot. But when the two-tier system threatened the competitive integrity of the tour, Morikawa stepped up. His signature confirmed that the younger generation of major winners would not accept corporate decisions that undermine their game. Morikawa does not care about the politics. He cares about the test of golf. He argued that changing the ball and downgrading the events would poison the pure competition he has dedicated his life to. Collin is widely considered the best iron player in the world. His entire game is built on hitting exact distances and controlling trajectory. A rolled-back ball would obliterate the precision of his approach shots. He could no longer attack tucked pins because the ball would not carry the same distance or bite the same way on the greens. He argued the USGA is chasing a problem that only exists on television. Casual fans do not care whether a player hits at 320 or 330. They care about watching the best in the world execute the hardest shots in golf. His quiet, iron-willed stance proved the rollback ruins the actual test of the sport. The traditionalists had drawn a permanent line. All that was left was for the ultimate veteran to carry it into the boardroom. Max Homa rounded out the visible leadership with a deeply personal stake. Homa built his entire career on exactly the kind of historic events the two-tier system wants to bury. He clawed his way onto the tour by winning those traditional tournaments, and he was not about to let a corporate plan erase their meaning. His signature spoke for every player who loves the history and the culture of the game. Homa told the front office the plain truth. Fans do not care about corporate efficiency. They care about the legacy of the events and the stars who fill them. Max talked about the specific fan culture at the events he loves, the supporters who line the rough at the Genesis Invitational, the volunteers who run the American Express. That culture cannot replicate it at some sterile corporate signature event. Downgrade these tournaments and you kill the soul of the tour. He pointed to the local economies too, the hotels, restaurants, and small businesses that lean on tournament week for a huge chunk of their yearly revenue. The players, Max made clear, are not just fighting for their own paychecks. They are fighting for the communities that hold this sport up. The entire locker room was finally united. But a list of names is just paper. The real test was who would walk into the room and deliver the ultimatum to the CEO's face. Keegan Bradley brought his leadership experience and his bone-deep understanding of tour tradition to that final meeting. As a playing captain and one of the most respected veterans in the game, Bradley was the perfect messenger. He walked into the private meeting at tour headquarters alongside the other 10 players. They did not leak it to the press. They did not post it on social media. They simply set the document on the table. Bradley looked Brian Rolapp dead in the eye and told him the future of the PGA Tour depended entirely on how he responded. The message was unmistakable. The players are the product, and the product refuses to be restructured without its consent. Keegan did not yell. He did not deliver some dramatic speech. He just laid out the facts. The players had reviewed the financial data, the legal regulations, and the broadcast contracts. They knew exactly how much leverage they held. Agree to the demands by the end of the week, or the council issues a public statement rejecting the rollback and the two-tier system. And the top players announce they are reviewing their contractual obligations for the downgraded events. Rolapp sat in silence for a long time. He knew Keegan was not bluffing. 11 players had done their homework, and they had completely checkmated the front office. Rolapp's response in the days that followed revealed just how much pressure the players had applied. He publicly stated that the tour had not made a final decision on the golf ball rollback, and that everything was still on the table. That might sound neutral to a casual fan, but anyone who follows tour politics knows exactly what it means. The CEO was backing away from the USGA's timeline. He was signaling to the players that their ultimatum had landed. The two-tier system faced an even steeper cliff. With 11 of the tour's biggest stars publicly opposed, the broadcast partners started asking hard questions. The entire financial foundation of that plan rests on player participation, and the players just made it painfully clear that their participation is not guaranteed. Professional golf is standing at a crossroads. The decisions made over the next 12 months will shape this sport for decades. The players hold the upper hand, and every fan of this game should be watching what happens next like a hawk. The USGA and the R&A are trapped now. They spent years building the rollback plan and publicly committing to it. If the PGA Tour refuses the model local rule, the governing bodies have to decide whether to force it onto their own championships. And if they do, players use one ball at the majors and a different ball at tour events. A logistical nightmare that would enrage the equipment manufacturers and bewilder the fans. The R&A is already taking heavy fire from European players and the global media. The PGA Tour's refusal has left the governing bodies stranded and alone, and they are finally realizing the hard truth. You cannot force a rule change when the actual product refuses to play by it.